that their Facebook page wasn't completely dead. It would help.
It kind of looks like they've got.
I have a feeling some of the major people involved in that project are kind of stepped back a little bit, at least social media wise.
It was very
When I heard
aggressive.
A year, they just said these people are not familiar with the permitting process.
Yeah. We were all thinking, wow, that's fast.
I know.
At the same time, though, it's got to be priority. I mean, we've got to do.
All right, today's meeting of the Environmental Advisory Board is called to order on October 16th. Welcome, everyone. The members of the Environmental Advisory Board were appointed by the City Council. We serve voluntarily, and the board's objective is to provide citizen insight to the City Council and staff on environmental activities within and affecting the City of Clearwater. Agendas of today's meeting are on the wall at the entrance to the City Council chambers. Please remember to turn off your cell phones and electronic devices. To ensure a complete record of the board's actions, we ask each individual speaking to clearly state your name and spell it for the clerk. Will the members of the board and staff please introduce yourselves?
Sarah Kessler, Engineering Department, Staff Liaison.
John Thomas, member of the board.
Jared Leone, Chair.
Mark Wright?
Ashley Pimley.
All right, thank you very much. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from last meeting. Board members, are there any changes or corrections? All right, hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve, aye.
All right, and a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The minutes are approved. We'll move on to citizens to be heard about items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here to speak about anything that is not on the agenda? Please come forward and state your name for the clerk. You will have 3 minutes to speak and about anything that's not on today's agenda. There's no dialogue between people speaking and the board member and from the podium and the board members until you've completed your comments. Thank you.
Elizabeth Dreyer. Need my address?
No.
I am here because I'm a candidate for mayor, and I'm a former member of this group. One of the things I'd like to see happen in Clearwater is for the Environment Advisory Board to have veto power over CDB development decisions, because I don't think there's been nearly enough consideration of environmental impacts when the city's made decisions to allow development or change zoning to allow for greater density. So I wanted to let you know that and find out from you, if you're allowed to tell me at this meeting, what kind of standards you would need in order to make those kind of determinations.
Are you done with your comments, or is that?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
it.
I will have to defer to Sarah on that. I don't believe we have the power, any powers like that,
Right.
legislative
As
powers.
currently
Yeah.
assembled, you do not have any of those powers. So that would be something that would have to be, the clerk would have to tell us how we'd have to go through that process. If that's something that came about, the city clerk would have to let us know how we could do that.
Yeah, that would require an ordinance or some formal change in procedure on the part of the city, but what I'm wondering is, because you all obviously have a background in this area, what you would need to see in terms of a rubric or set of criteria to make decisions like that.
Yeah, and
I don't know if you're prepared to talk about that.
I don't think we are, but I think that is something that, like Sarah said, would have to come from the city clerk in terms of how that process would go about, and then how that process would work with us moving forward in terms of what types of projects would come before us and how that would work moving forward with those, if those projects go in front of a city council, or what other type of board or authority that they have to go through. So I think that's one of those issues that there are other people that are paid that work at the city that know the answers to that may not be here today, that could provide those answers at a future meeting, or we can get your email address and try to forward you information as we get it available as well. Would that be?
And certainly at the year end, we make our recommendations and hope for the city to follow in suit in those recommendations.
Right. I'm talking more about specific projects.
Well, once you have a specific project and there's a proposal, it's usually a scoping analysis of, what would be the scope of environmental study for a particular project. And out of, a preliminary or, a design that's at a conceptual stage, a scoping document, so that whoever the project proponent is can then incorporate their studies as they move forward through the design process to address the environmental issues that would be pertinent to that particular project and its nature, location. Could be a myriad of issues that would be involved, but it's a scoping process, study, and then a whole series of reviews, I think, would be, come out of that. But all focused, as you note, on the environmental matters.
Yeah, but they would need to be required to submit something like that by you or by someone in order to do that kind of work, because it's going to take more time and effort and money, so.
As
I was
well-
just looking for some feedback from you on what you would like to see, but
Sir-
if you're not prepared to do that, I'll leave you my email and you.
So I know that we will be talking about more of what our direction as a board will be moving forward. So if I would think that may fall into the idea of what you're talking about. If you're going to stay for the rest of our meeting, maybe you can contribute to that discussion later
Okay,
on.
great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, please.
Hi, Brian Beckman. More just informational. I didn't send this out to you ahead of time, but I wanted to share what I consider to be great news. The county school board just yesterday in their workshop reviewed 2 new sustainability positions for the school district, a sustainability lead and a sustainability coordinator that my understanding reports into that lead. And my understanding is the lead will report into the assistant superintendent. And I think this is a great signal of things that this advisory board has been advocating for, a year or more in relationship to Clearwater and sustainability, and that has really helped have a ripple effect across the cities in the county, including, if you didn't know this already, the county itself having a new sustainability coordinator position now since the summer. And as the assistant superintendent talked yesterday, 2 things that stuck out to me. One is that one of the positions, they look to be there to essentially take over for the consulting company, I'll call them Synergistic, in the millions of dollars that they've helped them save on an annual basis on their energy, to essentially take over that role from them as their contract is ending in March. And I believe that's one of the types of partnerings that the City of Clearwater, your sustainability coordinator, is beginning to look at, which is great. And then, what was the second part there of the important piece? It's not just considered or concentrated on energy. It's a lot broader than that and brings a lot of opportunity. Oh, the second part was really on collaboration across the county, is what the assistant superintendent really stressed. That has already begun. If you didn't know, Ready for 100 cities in particular are collaborating with one another. That includes Safety Harbor, Largo, Dunedin, and some cities like Clearwater that have sustainability coordinators are collaborating with one another, as brought together. I'll point to the Safety Harbor City Manager that has helped initiate that to make that happen, and including the county and the Tampa Bay Resiliency Coalition Sustainability Coordinator as well. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you for your leadership on that on an ongoing basis, and just continued opportunities to try to learn from each other as those positions continue to develop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Yeah, thank you for your efforts and help with that as well. I think that what we've seen from across this area and in other places, having a sustainability coordinator is very forward-thinking and a good thing to have for planning and other purposes. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else has a comment to make or not, or we can move on. Okay, great. Thank you. We'll move on to new business items, the presentation of Crest Lake Park improvements.
Jared.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Please, come. I apologize, Glenna, please. I apologize.
Glenna Wentworth, 2227 Harn Boulevard. Hello, I just wanted to extend a formal invitation to everybody in this room to come to our first sustainability conference in Clearwater. It's this Saturday. The title is Building Better Neighborhoods Through Sustainability and a Toolkit for Positive Change. And it's being co-sponsored by the City of Clearwater, the Clearwater Neighborhood Coalition, and the Suncoast Sierra Club. And I'm on the planning committee. So I can tell you that this is very exciting for us. This is going to be a great conference. We've got 3 fabulous speakers that have a lot of experience in their field. One is Brian Beckman. By the way, I don't know if you ever heard Brian speak, but you're in for a treat. The emphasis is going to be on local resources and practical tips. So we have like 8 organizations that are coming. They're all local. They're going to be having tables with information for folks. And we're even going to have some interactive exercises at the end of the day. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope that you're planning on coming. Tell everybody you know. And that's it. Any questions about it? Yes. I'm sorry. It's at Ross Norton Recreation Center, Saturday from 9 to 12:30. Registration's at 8:30, coffee and donuts as well.
Yeah, I had that listed as one of my little announcements at
Oh,
the end.
did
Thank
you
you
have it
very
as an
much
announcement?
for mentioning it, Glenna, and thank you for organizing it and helping put it together. I hope that it's something that we can continue to see things like this in the future, and perhaps at other rec centers or at however revolving a time frame or however it may be. But
Hopefully
I
this
think
will just be the first.
exactly. Yeah. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Any other questions or okay? All right. And any other speakers? Make sure before we move on this time. All right. Moving on. New business items. Presentation of Crest Lake Park improvements. We welcome Kevin Dunbar and Matt Anderson. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm Matthew Anderson, Landscape Manager in Parks and Recreation Department. I oversee the Urban Forestry Department. I'm also a certified arborist. Actually did the tree inventory for Crest Lake Park for the project. It's a requirement for every project to have an inventory done. And what we're doing during an inventory is assessing the condition rating of each tree in the park. And that encompasses the overall health, structure, root systems, every aspect of the tree is looked at during that inventory process. So I personally looked at each tree. Each tree was assigned a tag. There was 646 total trees in the park. Of those trees, 142 of them were found to have a condition rating lower than a 3. The city's community development code lists a 3.0 or higher tree as a viable tree worth preservation. Anything below a 3 is considered hazardous. The rating scale is 0 to 6, 0 being a dead tree, 6 being a specimen. So the condition rating was assessed on each tree. We affixed an aluminum tag to it, which coincided with the site plan, essentially that allowed anybody that wanted to be able to take that site plan, that inventory, and go out and identify the trees and the different issues that each tree had. Of the 155 total trees that will eventually be removed, 142 of them have already been removed, and that was due to poor condition rating. So essentially, 13 trees will need to come out due to being in the way of structures, and those will not be removed until the project starts. But the reason that the 142 were removed was due to poor condition rating. And essentially, when the tree receives that rating, and we know about it, we don't have a choice but to remove it due to liability, not to the city, but also to protect our residents, and people that, patronize the park. So that's to give you a little background. There's been a lot of things stirring with regards to the tree removal. 155 keeps getting thrown out, and that's true. It will eventually be 155. It was 142 initially. Those trees have been removed, essentially for safety purposes for our residents. So, I don't like removing trees, but it's just simply, part of my job is to keep the citizens of the city of Clearwater safe, and also our visitors that come. We will be putting over 200 trees back in the park at the completion of the project. We're shooting to reinstall approximately 83 species. Obviously, that can't be completely nailed down at this point because of availability, due to the fact that it'll be next fall into early winter before the replacements are installed. So it's just kind of hard to know exactly what the market will bear for us to be able to, but that's our goal. Essentially, we will be installing an arboretum out there at Crest Lake using these species. And what that'll allow us to do, right now when you get a tree removal permit through the city, if you're required a replacement tree, we give you a list saying you need to put back a shade tree, an accent tree, whatever the case may be. This will give residents the ability to go out and see what these species actually look like, because it's easy to look at a book and say, oh, that's a great looking tree, but until you've seen it and kind of learn the characteristics and understand what that tree really looks like or could really become, you don't know until you plant it and essentially grows. So there'll be definitely be an educational component with that arboretum to help residents make better choices on tree selection. There's also a hurricane rating system that is put out through the Division of Forestry, and that will be added onto the sign as well, letting people know essentially the strength of that tree during a great wind event. So I know there's been some negativity with it up front, very little, but we want to put the positive outlook on it, because really at the end of the day, it's safety, education, and that's our standpoint on it. So if you guys have any questions?
Just one additional comment, Matt, if you'd also, the 13 trees that are being removed, how many of those are actually being retransplanted on the park site?
We're hoping to move 6 of those trees on the park site. We say removed initially because it's easier to say, hey, we're going to remove these trees, and if something were to happen during the transplanting process that they died, or simply they just were not able to be transplanted due to weak root system or drought stress having to kill one, we're covered in that sense. We don't want to say, hey, we're going to transplant them and not be able to be in that situation where we weren't able to live up to what we said. So we go ahead and just put them in removal, and the code reads that way. When you transplant a tree, you get a tree removal permit because you're essentially removing the tree from the location that it's at. So,
All right, I have 2 minor questions, really.
Sure.
Well, one, what's the age of the replacement trees? You're taking out trees that are several hundred years old, I assume, and replacing them with what age tree?
Varying on the size and species. We are trying to go back with code size replacement trees for the trees that we reinstall. And that on a shade tree is a minimum 10 feet overall height and a 2.5-inch caliper. And that's going to depend on the species, because of the native species, like Chickasaw plum and some of the other smaller trees, availability plays a huge factor in that. So they're going to be up to 2.5 to 3 inches, 10 to 15 overall height, but they could be as small as 6 feet and 1 inch. It's really going to depend on availability. As far as age, it's hard to say. The different species, due to growth rates, will be different age. More than likely, we'll just say 4 to 5 years would be the oldest tree that goes back in.
Okay, so young, much younger. And,
Yep.
and that leads into my next question.
Yep.
Where are these trees coming from? I mean, we're just moving trees around from another place to this place. Am I right? Is there a tree farm or another park, or where are these trees?
These will be sourced from a nursery. We have Florida grading standards, and that essentially gives you a guideline to select a healthy, structurally sound tree to put back. We plant minimum grade number 1. I don't know if you're familiar with grades and standards, but it's done through our Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and it's a standard for the whole state that's used. So essentially, we will purchase these trees from nurseries, and we'll bring them in, install them.
Interesting.
I have a
question.
Yes.
Was there a particular species that was, that has to be removed? And do they have, is there anything in common, like do you have more of one kind of tree that's dying and or diseased?
Correct. There is as far as the oak tree species that were removed, the more of it was laurel oaks. You know, laurel oaks were heavily planted back in the 60s and 70s. You know, Earth Day was coming around, the housing boom in Clearwater was really going strong, and developers planted laurel oaks very heavily because they're a fast-growing tree. But the issue with laurel oaks is they are a fast-growing tree. They're poor departmentalizers of decay, which means when you have to remove a limb, if it's not a small limb, essentially it causes decay back in the trunk, which weakens the overall tree. They have a short lifespan, anywhere from 40 to 60 years. 60 years would be one that was, you know, properly pruned throughout the life. And that's the thing, pruning has come a long way. We didn't have a lot of, you know, literature on pruning back in the 60s and 70s. It's one of those things that's evolved. It's become, it's a very good science now. Back in the 60s and 70s, we had books put out by the forestry department that showed flush cuts as proper cuts on trees, and now we know if you do that, it's going to lead to decay and essentially the death of that tree. So I guess to circle back to the question, laurel oaks, we also removed any invasive species in the park. So there was some palms that were out there that were invasive, Indian rosewood tree. There's very few invasives, but the ones that were out there, we made sure to remove them during this process. And those will be planted back with a native, you know, proper species for that location.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had the opportunity to review the video that you had done. Was very impressed with you know, how you took care on each individual tree, assessed its condition, and there were a whole variety of factors, I think, that contributed to saying this one's scoring pretty low on the ranking system. And I really like the idea of an arboretum. I guess this might be the only arboretum that you would consider that the city might have in its portfolio.
Yes, we have some trees that are identified out at Moxon Lake, older signage, things like that, and species have changed. We've got trees there with signs that don't tell the right tree, and then we've got signs with no trees behind them, just due to age. So this is really going to be our forefront as far as an arboretum.
This is a totally different setting than Moccasin
Completely
Lake, where, you know, you bring in 83 species, is what you indicated.
Yes, absolutely.
Plus what you might have there that has come in or was planted or came in from native growth. But that's a real attraction, and I like the educational focus for people to go out and
Absolutely.
Look at those trees. And also it's a learning factor to determine what trees grow best here in Clearwater as well. So.
One other function is we've vetted the list with the Audubon Society,
Yeah.
because species diversity, that's something that Crest Lake Park didn't necessarily have. Had a heavy concentration of live oaks, which typically rate well. They're a lot better species, slower growing things, but it's not a very diverse species.
Right.
So with putting 83 new species, we're also looking to clump these species, so there'll be like a conifer section. So you'd be able to go and look and say, okay, you know, here's 3 different species of pines. We've got red cedar. You know, you can really get a vibe for how those, you know, trees look and feel. Because even though they're pines, they all have different characteristics that you, unless you put them side by side, you necessarily wouldn't notice if you just looked at them in a book. So we're also going to be affixing owl boxes. That was another concern with the cavities in the trees that were dangerous. You know, we're taking away that. We're going to be affixing owl boxes to the healthy trees out there, you know, with help from the Audubon, you know, making sure that we put them in places and locations that, you know, will be advantageous to owls. So that was one of the other features that, you know, working with them has allowed us to do. So
Great project and great job.
thank you.
Was it your team that did the tree planting at Cliff Stevens Park there next to Moccasin Lake?
Coachman
It was
Ridge?
no, not Coachman Ridge. I'm talking about Cliff Stevens. There was a disc golf course there, and they planted, must have been 100 trees a few months back.
That was us.
That was a very good job. I really appreciate that. I wanted to make sure I said that in person.
Okay, yeah, we appreciate
I'm one of the people that benefits from that, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, one of the things when we have leftover trees from our annual tree giveaway, we try to go and utilize those in places where, you probably remember, we had that bunch of hazardous trees out there that had to be removed several years ago. And we wanted to utilize these trees to put in there and get that canopy going. And one thing, to kind of double back to your question as far as planting younger, smaller trees, a lot of people like to see a big 6-8 inch oak go back in somewhere. But what people don't realize is the number of years essentially it takes to establish this tree. Trees put root growth out first before they push top growth. So when you take a 6 inch, 4 inch even tree and plant it, the volume of water it takes to establish that tree is very high, and it's over a very long period of time. So you get the initial pop and a little bit of initial shade, but when you plant a smaller tree, it puts that growth into roots, which is a lot shorter, and once it does, it pushes that top growth. They take a lot less water over a long time, and if you plant a 1 inch tree versus a 4 inch tree, that 1 inch tree is going to outgrow that 4 inch tree over a period of time because of establishment time. So with a lot less water, which is also great because I mean water's something we have to be very careful with. So
Having Matt here, one of the things that I've asked in the past, and maybe you can answer this now that we have you here, the opportunity to put edible trees, oranges or citrus or anything like that, what's your take on that? And is there a reason why that isn't done, or is that something, an opportunity that can be done in places in the future?
Well, citrus is a tricky species due to citrus graining. You know, it affects almost all the different species. I mean, back when I was in planning, we rolled back the requirement for a permit on them to help people alleviate if they had a problem citrus tree. You know, the quicker you get that tree out, the less likelihood it is to spread to other trees. So as far as putting any citrus out, we will not be.
Oh, I guess any fruit trees, yeah.
We will. We're going to be putting a lot of species, not necessarily for the fruit, but to show people the potential for fruit in their yard. I mean, we've got, you know, like Chickasaw plums. I don't have the complete list, but it's something I can maybe send to Sarah and she could disperse to you guys.
Oh, that'd be great.
So you'll have an opportunity to look at it.
Thank you, yeah.
Because it's not just trees. We're also putting in the main bulk of shrubs and things going back in will be like firebush for our hummingbirds. You know, so it's not just, it's a whole variety of birds we're trying to cover and wildlife. So.
All right, great.
I'll get that too. So.
I think this is kind of two-part or one large question. I think, like you said, like the trees, they needed to be taken down, and I think the replacement plan, I think that worked out well. Is there an opportunity to present these tree replacement plans to perhaps this board before the trees are cut down? So it gives an opportunity for residents to kind of not be so shocked when they see the trucks out there cutting down the trees, and maybe for future tree plantings. I don't know if there's other parks in the future that you're planning to do these tree replantings, but maybe that's something that we can think about moving forward on other projects.
Yeah, let me tackle that.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'm Kevin Dunbar, Director of Parks and Recreation. We had multiple community meetings in the in the immediate Skycrest area, dating back as far as 2013.
Okay.
On the project. So, I mean, at the end of the day, public meetings are what they are, and not everybody gets involved, and all of a sudden they see something and they're surprised for the first time.
Yeah.
But the design of the park was developed by the community. In concert with the engineers and architects that we used, as well as the city staff. So it was a three-way process in terms of being able to do that at every step of the way, from schematic to conceptual to 30%, 60%, 90%. We had community stakeholders that actually sat in and were part of that whole process. That were from the neighborhood, who then disseminated the information back out into the neighborhood. So.
And the tree removal was part of those meetings as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
Thank you very much.
And the other thing just to share too is that we are at 90% now.
Okay.
So just so that the board knows, we're looking at end of January to early February to actually be breaking ground and starting construction on the project.
Oh, great.
We have our contractor at risk is on board already, so we're looking to get this moving, because like I said, we've been talking about it since 2013. If you may be aware of the council, this is the utilization of the BP funds. And that's when Matt talks about a lot of the education components and things like that. We thought it was an appropriate legacy project and the kind of elements that should be, it was just, the BP funds in our mind wasn't just a money grab. It was, how do we turn this into a positive for the community based upon, how and why we received the funds. So we're looking at about a year construction, so it'll be early 2021.
Okay.
Is when we should have the new park launch. But the entire park will be closed down during construction. That includes the dog park also.
Oh, okay.
If we were to leave like an element like that open, it was about $250,000 more for staging, and so we'd rather put the money into the park
Sure.
that way, so.
Okay. Thank you for the update, Kevin. Thank you.
One other
Yes,
thing
sir.
to add too, that would be pertinent for you guys' information is, currently the stormwater goes directly into the pond, and there's actually, rain gardens with another, potential. I don't know exactly the signage on that, but, to sort of explain how a rain garden works as far as filtration of, not only, trash and debris that would normally float in, but also some of those, heavy metals and things that, will be filtered out through these ponds before that water reaches Crest Lake, because currently right now it goes straight in the lake, and these rain gardens will help filter that. So there's another potential for educational component with that. So
Okay, great. Great. Does anyone else on the board have any questions? Anyone from the audience have any questions? All right. Hearing none, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you, Kevin.
absolutely, thank you.
All right.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to our next item, presentation on the storm utility fee from Roger Johnson. Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, been a year.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. All right, Dr. Johnson, I'm the stormwater engineering manager. I'm here to talk to you today about our stormwater utility fee. So let's start out with asking, what is the stormwater utility fee? So basically what it is, City Ordinance basically, all the legal jargon here basically tells us that, we collect this fee from every resident to help pay for our infrastructure and maintenance. So we often get asked, what is my fee versus what someone else's fee is? Am I paying too much? Am I not paying enough? Which they never say. But usually it's based off of, for a residential, whether it's a single family, a duplex, whether it's residential, it's considered one ERU, which is an equivalent residential unit. When we go to non-residential, such as commercial, industrial, it's based off of the impervious square footage of that lot. For instance, it's 1,830 square feet per ERU, so that's our calculation. So if you have an 18,300 square foot lot of impervious, basically when you divide that out, you end up with a 10 ERU. Multiply that by the stormwater utility fee, which is $14.87 per ERU. That's your monthly fee. So that's how it breaks down. I just want to kind of go back to what it is and how we get there. And now we're going to talk about what it actually funds. What are we doing with this money? More importantly. So this fee basically, it helps, stormwater utility fee funds our stormwater maintenance. So we have 42 full-time employees in our stormwater maintenance department. They're responsible for our street sweeping. We have 265 miles of road that get swept on a scheduled basis, depending on where it is. If we're on the beach, obviously a lot of Santa Cruz there, so we're probably going to sweep there more often than we would somewhere in countryside that doesn't have a lot of leaves. So we have some sort of schedule worked out, and those 265 miles are on a cycle as far as the sweeping. Stormwater asset inspection, we have crews that go out and make sure that the pipes are clean, the stormwater system is functioning as it should. If we have residents that are concerned that water is backing up in the street, these are the guys that we call, and they go out and they make sure that the system's clear, there's not a lawn chair in there or something blocking that pipe, restricting flow. What they also do is, we have outfalls on the beach that are a lot of the times submerged with water because the tides this week, our full moon tide is probably cresting some of the seawalls this week. And we have barnacles that grow in that environment. So, that is part of the stormwater maintenance contracts, is to have an annual cycle of cleaning these barnacles out of these submerged pipes so that we don't have constrictions. And I think at one point it was a 42-inch pipe that had so many barnacles there was an 8-inch hole. That's it. So the idea is to keep those things clean, to keep going back on a regular basis to make sure that they're functioning. The stormwater maintenance crews also run the pipe lining project, which essentially if we have an old corrugated metal pipe in someone's backyard and we have a drainage easement there, but everyone has built fences and other things in that area, and it's going to cause more damage to go in there and tear it out than it is to line the pipe with basically a poly liner. We usually line the pipe. 99% of the time we're going to line that pipe. So it's a structural lining. It's good for what they say 50 to 75 years, and you know that's another contract that the stormwater maintenance crew helps facilitate. They also do the underdrain contract. So if there's a high water table, or you know if we use the air park as an example, there's issues with groundwater there. You know, so we make installations to help draw down that water. If you've ever seen on a sidewalk when you're walking down the street, some of that water is kind of seeping across that sidewalk. Installation of underdrain in that case might help the situation. Routing that water through a perforated pipe, tying into the stormwater inlet system, and it basically goes below grade. So they help run that contract. Most importantly, I think the maintenance operation gives us, it basically opens the door a lot of the time to let us know. They're kind of our eyes and ears as far as where we might be having issues, where we can make system expansion projects, where we can make considerable repair projects. Our construction crews can handle a certain amount and scope and size of a project. Once it gets to a point where it's not feasible for a crew of 6 people to do it, then obviously engineering comes on board and we try and make a bigger project out of it. And that's when the stormwater crew down at MSB kind of kicks in. We have 10 employees and 1 intern, 6 in engineering. We have 3 environmental and 1 inspector, as well as our intern. So this engineering support, these people, which are paid, again, much like the 42 in the stormwater maintenance department, are paid directly from the stormwater utility fee. So the funding that we are collecting per ERU is helping fund these positions, such as, you know, our engineering support for land development. Every time a permit comes in, you know, we have really 2 staff members. We have a land resources person that's going to look at it for general engineering. We also have a stormwater person, and most of the time Sarah will look at it too as an environmental and kind of take a look at it, make conditions, make comments, make sure that they're doing things per a safe standard. We also have staff that attends the BPRC, we have the DRC, CDB, we have representatives on staff that handle the engineering side of things, which is looking at stormwater environmental aspects. And that's, again, paid for by this stormwater utility fee. We also have right-of-way permits that come in. You know, we all see those, our outside utility companies go and put new fiber everywhere. So we are the keepers of the right-of-ways engineering, so we are responsible to make sure that those facilities are going in the appropriate locations. For example, on Druid Road, we've had an ongoing project there for a very long time, and contractors have been wanting to install new fiber down the south side of Druid, behind the high school, and it's not the best place for it when they're going to be digging and putting handholds there if we are going to be digging that up and putting a 60-inch pipe in a brand new storm system. So talking with contractors and coordinating things, making sure those facilities are in the right place, that's another thing that this team is responsible for. Again, we have inspection services. We have 1 inspector on stormwater staff. He basically makes sure, he runs our stormwater projects. We have help from other inspectors too. But, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, everything is being built, you know, by the city projects, is being built per standard. We also do utility inspections for the private developments to make sure that they're meeting their standards. And once that building permit closes out, they can't close out without getting a final inspection from one of our staff members to make sure that the stormwater system is installed per plan, the as-built match what was actually given to us. So that whole process happens. That's the engineering support the land development provides. The environmental side, Sarah's our master environmentalist over here. She basically deals with a lot of the federal, local, state environmental permit requirements. She's our community rating systems, our CRS project leader. She also deals with inspections and compliance. We also have staff on board in case we need to do some environmental testing. You know, say we have, the city would like to buy, you know, purchase a property and it was an old car lot. You know, obviously, we're gonna have to do some environmental, you know, level 1 or level 2 assessment to see, is there petroleum, is there contamination? You know, if there is, what's the remediation? When we did the harbor view, we did, you know, asbestos surveys, which we handled or helped sub the asbestos survey for that to make sure that, you know, when we took that building down, it wasn't a harmful risk and environmentally we were covered. They also provide development review support, again, on permits and CDB, all that kind of stuff. And they help with our water quality environmental projects. That being said, this is one of the exciting ones. It's kind of in the works right now. We're about to kick off our design. Sarah's the team lead on this. She's running with it. Basically, if you haven't heard about it, it's our Cooper's Byron Master Plan. It's pretty, you know, we were fortunate enough when that Christian College went for sale that we were able to buy the wetlands and a little bit of the upland by Cooper's Point. And what this project's going to afford us to do is basically increase the water quality in Cooper's Bayou by basically allowing it to flush more. As it sits now, that Cooper's Bayou is stagnant, has nowhere to go. The old mosquito ditches are filled in. You know, there's no cross connections, it's all cut off. So it's basically suffocating, and there's not enough water flowing there to get substantial amount of tide through anywhere. So it just kind of sits there, and the water quality isn't that great. Seagrass has been dying out. So this project alone with those minor improvements there will help that. The more exciting part to me is the FDOT cut through that's a possibility, like they did on the other side of the bridge. FDOT has mentioned that they're interested in doing something similar on our side. So I'm sure Sarah can tell you all about this project.
We took a tour of
See? So it's
very exciting project.
It's a pretty good one, yeah. You know, we don't get these very often, so I'm glad Sarah's a project lead on it, and she'll make sure that we.
So when does that start?
Oh, goodness, I think we're in the pre-design stage. Is that
We're working on an RFQ to get a design firm to help us with the design plans. So the RFQ will probably be done after the first of the year. So we'll just start design after that.
Yep. Other than that, we have, you know, our regular stormwater folks. We have basically 6 plus an intern that work directly on building plan reviews, our developments. We also have, obviously, a lot of our job is responding to citizen concerns. If someone sees something or there's an issue with a system, maybe they just have a random question. You know, a lot of our time is designated to responding to, providing engineering support and responding to our citizens' concerns. For instance, you know, if there's a subdivision that's being built and it's impacting someone else by cutting off drainage that was historically going one way, we have to look at it and say, okay, well, you know, how can we help this situation? You know, what is our role here, and how can we help facilitate? And sometimes it might just be walking people, you know, taking them off the ledge a little bit and, you know, calming them down. The other half of it is actually finding solutions. So, you know, that's a lot of the job that we do up here. The meat and potatoes of us is our flood protection, water quality, system expansion projects, and our repair projects. So the meat and potatoes of what we collectively do as a group is the project work. And that's where a lot of the funding source from the ERU calculation and our stormwater utility fee goes to fund these projects, the design of these projects, the implementation of these projects, and obviously the maintenance once it's complete. So if we want to go through, I'm just going to go through a couple examples. I know I was up here last year talking about Hillcrest Bypass. That's one of them that's in here. But I'm just going to go through a couple that we've done, that we're doing now, and we're planning on doing here pretty shortly.
Great.
Glen Oaks, I'm sure you guys are pretty aware of Glen Oaks. That was a heck of a project. It was way before my time, before I was here. I wish I had a project like this where I could take, you know, that contributing area and make that big of an impact. Basically took 33 homes out of floodplain, tons of water quality components there. This project, you know, basically led the way for all the projects that I've been involved in since I came 7.5 years ago. So we built this project, and it basically allowed for all of the upstream projects to happen. So without this one happening, none of the projects that I've done in the last 7 years would be possible, because it would cause adverse impacts if this wasn't the first thing to happen. So this was my kickoff for the next projects. Here's missing one photo, but this is basically, this shows, it's not really what it looks like. If you drive by, you would not know that that's underneath the ground. It's basically a giant concrete retaining wall with labyrinth weir. Ooh, there it was. That's a labyrinth weir, so basically what that does, and it zigzags the water through at a very, very small velocity so that your pre-post velocity, your flow rate is the same pre-post. So it's just it's a very creative way to slow water down but still get the volume that you need. So this one was pretty awesome. Hillcrest Bypass, I talked to you about this last year. We're halfway through construction, I'd say. It's a heck of a project. We got 36 homes coming out of the floodplain with this one. Again, flood protection project. Basically, we're putting a giant box culvert. It's 12 by 7 box culvert, way bigger than me, going all the way down 1,200 feet down the street. Here's a couple pictures for you. It doesn't really look that impressive unless you're actually out there or you see the people putting it together, and all of a sudden, the size and scope of it kind of, it's mind-boggling. So I don't anticipate this bypass being full. It's a lot of water, but it's definitely gonna it's gonna drop that flood stage and take those 36 homes out of floodplain, which is pretty awesome. Druid Road, Allen's Creek, I alluded to this one earlier. It's also in the construction phase. This project has been ongoing for quite a while. We're hammering it out now. We're putting 60-inch pipe in where there was no pipe before, hardly. There's a 24-inch pipe. We're going to 60. If you've ever driven down Druid Road in a rainstorm, you know what happens. It's a water slide. From Hercules all the way down to Arcturus is a water slide. So basically what we're trying to do is capture all the water on Hercules where there's no stormwater system, put that in a stormwater system, capture all the water that was east of Hercules, which had no stormwater system, put it below ground, and then tie it all into a new system to the head wall of Lake Julia. So again, this is a water quality project per SwiftMud, who's our cooperative funder for this one. We applied for it as a water quality and flood protection project back in 2014, and at the time they didn't have a rubric for grading a project water quality and flood protection. It had to be one or the other. So in that case, if I were to come back today and go for this project, we would have had more funding source available from SwiftMud. But we did in this case get the baffle box covered under this project for the water quality aspect. But that was it for the $4 million project. But regardless, that stage, that water is going to go underground. It's no longer going to be a water slide. We're going to get some treatment out of it. So this is kind of just a water quality and flood protection, but it didn't really get that kind of name. So this is our baffle box going in. It's a little one. It's not a big deal. It's basically a tractor trailer. If you guys have seen these before, we put them on a lot of projects around the city. SunTree does a good job with their units. We put the new aluminum pieces in here because it's the new upgraded version that doesn't rust, doesn't fall apart, and hopefully it works well. The next one we have coming up, this one's at the probably 50-60 design stage. We have some easement acquisition that we need to actually build this project. This is in conjunction with Pinellas County's project. Right now they're doing Sunset Point, where they're putting a new bridge in at Sunset Point that's been closed for quite a while. Basically, we submitted to SwiftMud to do our project, which is replace the bridge at Springtime from 1928, replace the bridge at Overbrook, which is similar in age, and add an additional box culvert barrel across Douglas Avenue. So what this does, because of Glen Oaks, is now we can increase the amount of flow coming through this area. So essentially, the choke point is now relieved, so upstream no longer has flooding. So 11 homes out of this one get pulled out of the floodplain, and this is in conjunction with, like I said, Pinellas County. Our benefits hinged on Pinellas County doing Sunset Point upstream. If they did not do Sunset Point, it really wouldn't make a difference. We couldn't do ours because there'd be adverse impacts. And Pinellas County relied on us to do our section because they don't get the benefit of anyone out of the floodplain if we don't do our section. So that's the commingling. It's a joint application that we're working together with Pinellas County and SwiftMud to get that one going. So right now that one's at 60%. Like I said, we have some easement acquisition because state waters and it gets complicated, but we're working on that. So, like I said, stormwater utility fee, basically what it does, it provides resources, empowering our staff to make a difference. And, this resource allows our staff to go and make things better. So, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, please.
You made John go first this time.
Starting out with the criterion that you have for the 1,830 square feet of impervious area, that kind of determines how many units of, your fee that you're going to charge. Do you have any credits for groundwater recharge, which is a big issue here as well? I know that big investments have been made in terms of putting, treated effluent back into the ground in Clearwater. And, are there incentives for people creating new impervious surfaces to use, infiltrative drainage systems or, putting water back into the ground rather than into the storm drains?
When it comes to that specific, like deep water injection or any of that, that's handled by our utilities division. What we do for the stormwater part, it doesn't really affect your ERU calculation or your fee, stormwater utility fee. Say you were a developer and you wanted to build a new subdivision, or you wanted to build new condos, and you're required to have treatment attenuation volumes per our regulations for the entire site of that new development. What we allow is, if there was something on that site previously, like a parking lot or a building, we would count that as 50% of the area impervious would count towards that volume. So you get some sort of credit when it's that redevelopment criteria. If you were using, we've actually gone on a limb a little bit and changed our criteria for alternate methods, like pervious pavers. I'm open to different new technologies, as long as there's basically a specification that says that this is how it needs to be built, this is how it's built, and there's a maintenance plan involved with it. Because sometimes when you install those type of things, they kind of get installed and forgot about, kind of like, cleaning a vault out. It doesn't really happen. You just install it and no one ever cleans it. So that maintenance plan and the responsibility is part of it. But we're open to new things, and we're open to discussions as far as our criteria and the impact of that. But when it comes to the ERU calculation, we don't offer credits for that at this time.
To me, it makes sense to have some kind of incentives to have people looking at infiltrative drainage, and whether it's lesser money on the fee or some other way of encouraging that kind of engineering solutions to be evaluated during the process.
That's a good point.
Another question I had or comment is, when you're taking these properties out of the floodplain, are you affecting the FEMA map changes that go along with that, or is that to the homeowners then to have to deal with? Because the map change process is not the easiest one with FEMA.
Don't we know? So the intention was, when we did Glen Oaks and we do all these other projects, we didn't want to keep going back to get maps done, get maps adjusted. The idea is that we're going to basically finish these projects and then try and adjust the maps accordingly. I'm not sure what the logistics of that are at this point. I know it's a very complicated process. I'm hoping every homeowner's not going to have to go through that. I'm hoping that we'll help that effort.
Yeah, I'm sure those homeowners might be paying some substantial flood insurance premiums, and there's, certainly some
Yeah.
and
That's why we're doing
benefits
it.
to be realized, both for the residents and I think the city. But I think that's something that needs to be incorporated in those projects, if at all possible. I know I've gone through that FEMA map change process. I know what
And
it
of course,
entails. It's not easy.
when we're out doing these projects, they're not like we're having campfires in the backyard and it's a great time for everyone. It's we get in people's business, and we're there for a while. So if we can, half of selling the project, not only that we get to take people out of the floodplain, half of it is saying, what, we're doing these to benefit your neighbors and yourself.
Right.
So I think that's a responsible thing to try and continue to promote.
I could just put 2 cents in there. So we're working on a map change on Alligator Creek, which we didn't, none of those projects we talked about in Alligator Creek. So right now, we have applied to FEMA, and that is a significant map change. And so we are requesting, we're not asking a homeowner to go and change their little map. Like, we've done the engineering for it, and so we are presenting that to FEMA and working on that process. Very lengthy, multiple years, like, working through that. One reason, and Roger alluded to it, that we have not gone to map changes for every single project is so many of these projects rely on each other. And so it's like if we just did Glen Oaks, the impacts, positive or negative, that we had at Glen Oaks, if we just did that, we would have to modify it again because of the Hillcrest project, because it changes things along the way. And so by waiting until we have the entire chain done, we make it so we only have to do it once, as opposed to modifying it every time we have another project. And so that's one reason. So the other thing Roger mentioned is I am the CRS coordinator, Community Rating System, which is under the FEMA umbrella. And so we get additional credit savings from the National Flood Insurance Program. And so I do take those 33 homes from Glen Oaks, that project, and apply it to that program. With Cape Hawk Park, which again is on the Alligator Creek side, that's been done for quite a while. We took 254 homes out of the floodplain and turned that into a big park, and so we got additional credit for that. And so all of these projects get credit through the community rating system, and that helps all residents on their flood insurance rates. So we do that part of it as well.
Is there a timeline when that request to FEMA will be done, when these projects kind of all are at a point where you would say, is it like a 5 to 7 year thing, or further out than that?
No, we don't have a specific.
Okay.
I would say we're getting close to the end of when those projects.
Depends on what watershed, but yeah.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
with Stevenson Creek, I think we're getting towards the end of the number of projects that we have. And so I think that would be.
So that one would be sooner than some of the other projects that are different watersheds.
Well, to be honest with you, we've had the stormwater utility fee for quite a while, and we've taken some hits because our stormwater utility fee was relatively high compared to other municipalities throughout the state. But our system is the way it is because of this, and we were able to do, we did watershed master plans for each watershed, which basically identified our Glen Oaks, our Cape Hawks, where we could get these wins, where we could pull these people out of floodplain. So in doing this from 20 years back and building these projects out to where they are now, we've got all the low-hanging fruit. I hate that term, but we have all of the big projects in line, in construction, if not nearly in construction at this point, that are identified in those original watershed master plans. So, the end is near, but there's always room for change. But I think when we finish a segment in that watershed is the appropriate time to make those map changes.
Get a lot of support from the residents and some very happy faces, I'm sure, when that happens.
Yeah, I for one am very excited about the work I've seen done along Alligator Creek coming up to alleviate a lot of the flooding along there. My question is, when does the price go down? Does this have an end? That's what everybody really wants to know, is when do I ever get a lower rate? When am I going to line up with everybody else?
Well, everyone's lining up with us. We're not lining up with them.
Yeah, it never goes down, right? It always stays the same or goes up.
Blatantly honest. Tampa's going to be more than us. St. Pete is soon going to be more than us. They're trending because we've had 20 years of this, and our infrastructure is in pretty good shape, that we don't have the need to raise our rates considerably to make up that differential. And then, this year, our rates staying the same and then staying the same next year. So, the way that structure works, we basically have someone that does a rate study for us every year to determine where the needs are. Originally, without getting into a lot of detail, there was some political pressure and some regulations that might be coming down the pipe that we wanted to be ready for. If we had to start doing, stormwater treatment facilities, how are we going to fund that? How are we going to do that? How are we going to plan for that? So I'm not going to say that our rates are going to go down. Our rates are where they are because that's the sustainable rate for our infrastructure. So I would anticipate other municipalities meeting or exceeding us to catch up and to maintain their infrastructure.
So at best, it can flatline for a while then?
As
these projects are being completed and
it's dependent
just the
off
need
of the analysis. But, like I said, things are the way they are because we were proactive.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Well, other than little, like when Sunset Point get done, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
You think Druid's a water slide, go down Sunset Point during a rainstorm, that's a water
Right.
slide and a half.
Like I said, we're not having campfires in the backyard.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a short-term thing for a long-term, at the end of it, it's totally worth it.
You've done a wonderful job with some of these larger projects, the Cape Cod Park, Glen Oaks. To make viable parks, people spaces, and, wildlife habitat, new wetlands, that's a great job.
And I think the focus that SwiftMud has now on their cooperative funding their requirement now is, no matter what your project is, if you want cooperative funding, you have to show a water quality component, which we were doing anyways, but now they're requiring everyone to do that and have their cost benefit of those water quality included in each of the submittals, so.
I still have some of the same concerns I had last year regarding that project with the culvert, where I'm looking at it, I don't see much fencing around there, and the kids and the animals can still easily get in that culvert. That was one of the main concerns I had last year, as I recall. It still doesn't look safe, but I'm
See
only
how it
seeing one
shakes out.
picture.
I had a couple of quick questions. Do you have a maintenance program for swale, for digging that out, or is that something, I didn't see if that was mentioned?
Yeah, we have an actual dedicated crew that goes and maintains our ditches and our swales. They maintain for flow, so if, they'll cut the ditches on an annual or whatever their cycle is for that specific. So yes, we do have a program for maintaining our ditches and swales.
Okay.
We do, I caveat that saying that we don't mow them like a golf course. We mow them so that they function. We maintain our ponds so that they function. So if there's accrual of vegetation that will lay down in a storm event, we're not going to be taking care of that. But if a tree were to fall across a creek and impede flow, then obviously, yes.
If there's swale in a neighbor's yard, is there a phone number they can call if it needs to be cleaned, if it hasn't been cleaned out for years? Is there someone that they can call, or do you guys just have a maintenance schedule that takes care of this regularly?
So that's a tricky one.
Okay.
We have city swales and ditches that are our responsibility. We also have swales and ditches that are private responsibility of homeowners. We have HOAs that are responsible. So it all depends. Typically, the phone calls come up to us, and we determine, if it's use of city resources to maintain that. If it's county, I'll call the county and say, hey, we got a phone call. So we all work together to try and figure it out. Sometimes the answer is yes, we'll be out there and on a quarterly basis. Sometimes the answer is, I'm sorry, that's a private one. I wish I could help you. But,
Okay.
that's kind of how I have to handle those.
And then you mentioned relining the pipes. You mentioned as far as in some cases where it's impossible to get back there and redo them. What is the material if you are going to redo them? Do you use corrugated metal, or is it concrete that you?
The pipe that we actually, it's an interesting process.
Not just if you're going, not to reline it, but if you're going to actually replace those lines where they have problems. What is the replacement?
Typically, it's concrete.
Okay.
We're open to an ADS or a poly if it's in a non-traffic bearing area. But typically we like concrete because we know that it works. Again, just like anything else, I'm open to new products. I'm open to being a little bit more progressive if there's some available product there, but it needs to substantiate being there versus something else.
Okay, and then one last thing, sorry, and I don't know if this is something you can help answer, if it's a dialogue between different departments, but and I think we see this during large rain events, that the sewer, like the Marshall Street plant, there's just too much stormwater that somehow leaches into the sanitary system. Is there a program that you guys are working to try to identify where this is happening or how to reduce the water that just this kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, leaching into there?
I haven't been directly involved in it, but it's my understanding that we've had an I&I problem, or a project, which is basically an infiltration project, where utility departments installed, if you have a manhole in the middle of the road and the rim is leaking, when it rains and stages up, that goes into the sewer system. So they're putting pans on those, seals on those, new manhole covers. They've done a bunch of smoke testing. They've made repairs, lining contract for them as well. What they'll do is they'll line their pipes. Say they have a void or something in that pipe. They have a liner contract just like we do. But they'll throw a liner through there so it's no longer taking that stormwater. So there's been a lot of measures taken in that INR project to try and bring things up. For instance, your clean out in the front yard. We've done a ton of clean out replacements. To make sure that the right clean out is there and, the brass cap is put on it. And, if it starts raining, that the resident doesn't go out there and just unscrew it and then it goes into the sanitary system. So there is a program. It's been working. It's still happening now.
Okay. All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? All right, hearing none, we will, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, please step forward, Elizabeth, and state your name for the record. Oh, yeah, of this. Okay.
First of all, congratulations on avoiding a lot of the problems other Florida cities have had with sewage overflow for Clearwater. Appreciate that. I was wondering what impacts you've seen from the construction of the new medical school on Cooper's Bayou.
We haven't seen any impacts when it relates to that. They're a self-sufficient unit. They're required to have stormwater treatment attenuation on site. They have their own sanitary sewer system that goes into a pump station. So they're self-sufficient. I don't see any issues at this point with that development as far as meeting the regulatory requirements or discharging anything that they weren't previously doing. So they've done a good job to make sure they built the right thing for us.
Is anyone monitoring the wildlife? What's going on with?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, any other? Okay. Then we will move on. Thank you, Roger. We will move on to item 4.3, prepare our presentation for the Environmental Advisory Board to City Council in December. So I will open up this discussion. I actually put together some notes that I will read, and then maybe we can go off of that if everyone else has anything else to add or discuss or dissect or anything else. I think as we look toward 2020, our board has discussed myriad environmental issues, including septic tanks, single-use plastics and other litter, trash receptacles, alternative energy and solar use, green building practices and tree removal. Last year we presented about the need for a sustainability coordinator, and city leaders followed through on that initiative this year. The EAB discussion on single-use plastics and polystyrene over the last couple years led to a resolution that City Council passed. We hope that that also leads to further action eliminating these items at city special events. But we serve as an extension of the City Council, and our objective is to provide citizen insight to city leaders and staff on environmental activities within and affecting the city of Clearwater. And it's a fairly broad yet narrow focus. I think what we want to do is look toward what the role of the Environmental Advisory Board is, and at what point should city projects come before our board? Is there a requirement for them to, and what impact do we have, or residents have as well on projects or environmental issues if plans are already in place or projects are already near completion? Perhaps this takes the shape in the form of staff developing parameters to review appropriate projects at the 60% phase. A team that goes over these could include the sustainability coordinator, a representative from environmental engineering, and stormwater engineering could determine which projects would come before our board. I think we've had an engaged board and an engaged group of citizens who provide valuable insight. And as resiliency, sustainability, and quality of life issues related to the environment continue to the forefront. Our board should be receptive, flexible, and considered a valuable partner as these projects and plans move forward. And as the city continues to work on and tackle large capital improvement and other projects, let's consider how our board can contribute to make Clearwater bright and beautiful. So with that, I open up the rest of our discussion to how we'd like to, and what we would like to present to council. But that's kind of where I'd like to see our conversation go toward, so.
Oh, boy, I have nothing to add to that. That is wonderful.
All right. So, yeah, John?
I think, one of the points that Ms. Strayer brought up, about the scope of environmental reviews for larger projects within the city, is an important issue. I know the development code goes, a certain distance to provide evaluations, but there may be, a better way to address broader scope of environmental issues and encouraging some of the green design initiatives, some of the LEED criteria perhaps, and from the whole host of issues from transportation, air quality, water quality, looking at if there's wildlife habitat issues, we don't have that many true green spaces, but there are issues that certainly dependent on the site's context and what the proposal is, may warrant some investigation of things that aren't specifically identified in the present codes.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I think maybe we didn't cover there in that thing, there's the special events that we have going on, and how we've talked. I know Mr. Beckman over there had spoken before about more recycling at these events, no styrofoam, and eliminating a lot of these things. Making the permit process for special events include questions about that and requirements for recycling and eliminating single-use plastics and things like that as part of the special events permitting process. That was the only other thing I might add to that.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think when we talked about that in the past, that was one of the things we wanted to make sure that the city was a leader as well, to lead by example. And I think that, John, you make a good point. There are a lot of issues, and they are in many different departments, and somehow they filter to environmental concerns at some point. And so I think for us, we want to know at what point and how does what we have to say impact some of these things. And I think that what we've seen over the course of the last, at least for a while at least, we have a lot of good input. And I think that it's a good opportunity to add that moving forward to what is being done throughout the city. So with that, I guess we can open up discussion to if there's no.
One
Yeah.
other.
Oh, yes.
I guess it's one of my little
Yes.
projects that I'd love to see is a solar canopy over some of the beach parking lots, and do it as a pilot. Does it pay for itself both with the energy created as well as a premium parking fee to park in the shade?
Yeah.
And does it work? I don't know. If it does work, and I think it also really conveys a sense to tourists and people that Clearwater is doing things that are green. And I know the mayor had indicated that there's a desire to have that perception.
Yeah, certainly. And I know that solar and alternative energy, and I guess as it's related to parking structures, is
Something
something
with new building construction in general, right? I mean,
very well. All right. Any other comments from the board? Ashley?
I'm good. Yeah.
All right. John? All right. We'll open up discussion to the audience. If anyone has anything to say, please step forward and say your name. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Beckman. Yeah, just to, I guess, echo a lot of the comments that I heard up here. There's all these opportunities, simply starting with new construction, to incorporate kinds of standards that were mentioned here. Environmental standards, whether they're LEED focused or in other areas. Those are ongoing opportunities, and I realize in some ways it can maybe seem too broad to bring in front of the council because they might be so large, but yet I think it's still important to reinforce that they could either set standards or, like John was saying, to start pilot efforts in some of those different areas. You know, to the point around solar, there still hasn't been solar put on a building yet or plans to do so. There's been some level of investigation, which is a great start, but it's hasn't resulted in anything yet. So continuing to advocate for those kind of things as, I guess, a continuation of some of the steps that have been taken over the last year would be great things to have the council seriously consider from the advisory board. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Brian. Any other comment from the audience? All right. Hearing none.
Can I just-
Yes, please, Sarah.
One more thing to discuss, the dates of the council meetings are either December 5th or December 19th.
We get to choose?
You get to choose.
Oh, well, I'll take the 5th.
Me too.
No, you have to answer. Sorry. Okay, all right. All right, yeah, the 5th sounds fine. That works. All right. All right, we'll move on to old business items then. Anything, Sarah? All right, director's report? Is that you too, Sarah?
So at the back of your packet, I gave you a sheet there that has next year's meetings. So add those to your calendar. Same months as we've had, just the third Thursday, or third Wednesday? Is that what we are? Third Wednesday. So that's the same as this year. So if there's anything, okay, back up. I am going to try to get a couple of speakers and some information, some specifics about eliminating polystyrene, maybe single-use plastics, like what other communities are doing at special events. And I will contact a few people to see if we can kind of have a little bit of a forum in January and be able to discuss that, if that's amicable for you guys
Yeah,
for the
I'm
January
amenable to that,
meeting.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
And, one of the things in this meeting that, I had brought up the last meeting was about the littering fines and things like that. I don't know where we're going with I was hoping to have somebody report on
Yeah, maybe we could
the
get some.
status of, are we fine? Is there a revenue stream for these fines? What's happening? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Can we do something? Do we need to get with the state? That's a discussion I'd like to have.
Yeah, I think some metrics on tickets that have been
Yeah,
issued
yeah,
for
that was
littering,
definitely
those kind
part
of
of it.
things. And, yeah, I think as part of that, if there's a way, because we've talked about litter a lot, all the time.
Endlessly, yeah.
And
It's
some of it
it's
has
my
been,
thing.
we talked about enforcement as an issue to kind of help alleviate the problem, but also perhaps there's a marketing campaign where we can let people know that cigarette butts are trash. I think that there's a misconception by a lot of people, just a cultural, I don't know for lack of other way to describe it, that people don't really think that when they flick a cigarette out the window or on wherever, that it's trash. And it is trash, and maybe there's a way that we can put that out in sunshine lines or something, or some messaging that we can help kind of promote the idea that it is trash and it is worth a $500 fine or a $250, whatever that fine may be if it's seen being thrown. So yeah, maybe we can work on something like that as well for January. Anything else?
I do not have anything else.
Okay, anything from board members?
That was it for me.
John? All right, let me see, I think I wrote a couple other things down here too, just to, Glenn had already mentioned earlier today, the Clearwater Sustainability Conference is Saturday. Hopefully we can make it. It's from 9 to 1 at Ross Norton Rec Center. It's a really exciting event. November 2nd, there's also Operation Shred, so if you have a bunch of things that you want to get rid of and shred, that's a place at Morningside Recreation Complex. You can shred things there. The Jazz Holidays this weekend, so hopefully there will be a lot of trash and recycling receptacles there that will be used, and we won't see photos of lots of garbage on the lawn when everybody's done listening to the great performers that are going to join our city this weekend. And I wanted to bring attention to cleanup that Ocean Allies and Keep Pinellas Beautiful did recently. It was October 6th, and they had hundreds of volunteers, and they collected it was 530 pounds of trash from Clearwater Beach, along an area that is fairly trafficked along the beach, and the rake goes there. So if you don't think that trash is in areas on the beach, there is trash in places where you might not even consider that it's being picked up and it looks like there isn't. So yeah, trash is a ubiquitous problem that we try to figure out solutions for. And I also wanted to commend the mayor. I saw at a recent work session meeting that he's pledged to sign the Climate Mayors Group and sign on to that. So I thought that was a great thing for us to join the more than 427 other cities that have also signed on to that. So with that and nothing else to be said, we'll adjourn.
On time.
Thank you.